I used to be into deep-sea diving. The rush of going down into an environment that was wholly unsuitable for humans used to make me excited. You would think the scariest things would be resting in the oceans. And sure, I've had some scary experiences there. But it was what I found at the bottom of a man-made lake that caused me to give up diving for good. It was a lake that was privately owned by an old rich man. The lake had been created almost 100 years ago, and it flooded a small town, leaving houses resting at the bottom. The old man put out a rather strange request for some divers to survey his lake. I guess he feared that people were invading his property and dumping things. He regularly stocked the lake with fish so he could have his own private fishing area. I think his biggest fear was that there may have been bodies resting at the bottom of the lake, though he had never said that out loud. My buddy and I accepted the call and donned our wetsuits and diving equipment. The old man had taken us out on his boat towards the center of the lake, and we were to dive and record everything we could down there for the old man's records. The old man would be waiting on his boat and monitoring our cameras through live feed monitors. The water was cold, despite the warmer air of spring, but by being insulated by our suits, the two of us made our way underwater with our cameras running and feeling relatively comfortable. Our dives had taken us to much deeper depths, and with much colder and inhospitable waters. Underwater seemed mostly devoid of life, save for the few bass that the old man had stocked. The most incredible thing was the old houses that rested at the bottom of the lake. Their exteriors weathered by the water, but still mostly intact. The houses stood as chilling monuments to a once small town. While the deteriorated houses were certainly interesting, we both knew that they could also serve as a death trap. Numerous small caves had been hostile to even the most experienced divers, and so we took the same precaution around the houses as we would with underwater caves. Our job was simply to scout the lake, so we weren't going anywhere that would potentially endanger us. It took a few hours, and several times we had to resurface and equip ourselves with new oxygen tanks. But as we made our way to one of the unexplored corners of the lake, I spotted something resting at the bottom. It appeared to be a large white chest, and as I got closer, I could see that it seemed to be a large freezer chest. But the thing was wrapped in heavy chains that prevented us from opening it. On the top of the chest, though obscured partially by the chains, we could still make out the words that had been spray painted in red. "Do not disturb the Dullian Shrine." I looked to my friend, who could only give me a shrug, before I heard a crackle, and then the old man's voice came through the radio. "The hell is that? Come on up and let's try to get a winch hooked up to it. We'll pull it on out." Hooking up the winch was pretty simple, since the freezer was already wrapped in chains, and I sent a signal to the old man to let him know it was hooked on and ready to be pulled up. I stood aside as the freezer lurched forward, leaving a small imprint in the lake's floor. It dragged across the bottom for a bit before being pulled up vertically. "Make your way back up, boys. I'll need your help moving this thing and getting the chains off," the old man said. Moving heavy objects or opening chain freezers was not in our job description, but the old man was paying so well that neither of us would stop to question it too much. But I did think hard about those words scrawled on the freezer. An ominous warning that in hindsight should have convinced me to leave the thing to rest underwater. But the allure, or some would say greed caused by money, had us all ready to crack that freezer open. On the boat, we found the freezer to be incredibly hard to move due to its sheer weight. The fact that it was filled with water made it heavier than it needed to be, but I also assumed that there was something inside weighing it down too. As we pushed the freezer towards the center of the boat, I mentally prepared myself to find a corpse or a collection of human lambs. You don't find candy in a sunken, chained up freezer. I used a pair of bolt cutters to break the chains in a few areas, and we started moving the chains away from the freezer. A few more seconds and the broken chains rested on the ground surrounding the freezer. The message scrawled on top, clearly visible now. Do not disturb the Dullian Shrine. The old man eyed the message, running his hand over the top of the freezer. He walked around it, examining it from all angles as water from the freezer leaked onto the deck. It was as if the old man didn't want to open the freezer either. At the time, I was filled with an ominous feeling of dread, and I think the other two were feeling the same thing. Either of you ever heard of this Dullian Shrine? The old man asked. The two of us shook our heads and stood to the side, allowing the old man the honor of opening the thing. He gingerly lifted the top of the freezer, and as he did, the sky met us with the booming sound of thunder, another ominous sign that something was not entirely right. I saw the old man's eyes go wide, and I knew that it was something terrible. My buddy and I moved forward so that we could see just what the old man was looking at. Inside was a small shrine made from what appeared to be bones. Whether human or animal, we were unsure, but it was nevertheless unsettling. 3 long bones formed a distinct pyramidal shape. At the top where the bones met each other, they had been fused together. Resting atop the fused bones was a golden piece shaped like a serpent. I think the 3 of us were all quite confused, and the old man seemed angry he had even wasted his time and effort dragging the thing up from the depths. He hastily snatched the golden serpent piece from the shrine and stuck it in his pocket, and then commanded us to finish scouting out the lake. The rest of our job went smoothly, though I just couldn't get my mind off that shrine. Who made such a thing, and why was it here? I assumed that I would never get answers to these questions, and yet the shrine lingered in my mind. Even after the old man paid us both with a nice sum of cash, I found myself lying awake that night, wondering just what that accursed shrine might be for. As I closed my eyes, I could still see that shrine in my mind's eye, and I felt a sinking sensation, like I was being pulled down into the depths. I awoke with a startling gasp. I could feel the ache in my back from laying on hard ground. Hard ground. I realized that I was no longer in my bed, but back on the deck of that boat, back on that lake. A stirring of fear started within me, and my hands began to tremble as I rose to my feet. A heavy mist shrouded the area, making it impossible to see further than a few feet. But even in that dense mist, I could see that my diving friend was right beside me, waking up himself, and just as disturbed about it as me. That freezer with that ominous warning was still sitting open on the deck where we had left it. Yet the shrine that was once inside was now absent. We made our way into the cabin, and we found the old man. His body sat slumped in a chair, his head tilting back, mouth agape with blood trickling out. In his hand, he clutched the golden serpent piece that he had taken from the shrine. Putting a finger on his neck, I attempted to search for a sign that he still clung to life, but it seemed that something had taken him. We tried to get the boat moving, but it seemed that the engine was damaged or it had malfunctioned. We were stranded on the boat with visibility very close to zero. Something heavy hit the side of the boat, causing it to violently rock. I was thrown to the deck, my elbow hitting the ground hard, and pain started shooting through my arm. I used my hands to try and stabilize myself as the boat rocked. My friend had been able to brace himself on one of the rails. As I pulled myself up to my feet, we were greeted by a nightmare of the waters, one of man's worst fears. A monster's face pierced that thick mist. Razor-sharp teeth and shining golden eyes stuck out against the myriad of white scales that made up its face and body. It peered at us for a few seconds as we trembled in fear. The face rose higher into the air, revealing the serpentine body that emerged from those waters. It rose higher and higher until the serpent loomed over us. Its face now barely visible, save for those piercing golden eyes that I'm sure saw us as little more than ants.
You have disturbed the shrine. Now you will join us down below.
The serpent said. The serpent retreated beneath the waters, and a few moments later, there was a terribly loud sound. A tearing of steel, and we immediately knew the hull had been pierced. The boat began to take on water and sink, but we were equipped with our diving gear. The two of us took a few moments to fully equip ourselves as the boat was rapidly sinking. The idea of being in the water with that thing terrified me, but I had no choice in the matter. As the boat was going under, I put in my mouthpiece and I dove into the water after my friend. Darkness filled my vision, and I could feel the turbulence of the water as that massive serpent swam around us. I flicked on my light, and as my eyes adjusted, I saw dozens of smaller serpents coming for me. Their long bodies and sharp teeth filled me with terror. All I wanted to do was scream, but I had to remind myself to stay calm. The serpents could have very easily ripped me to shreds, but as the first one reached me, it surprisingly didn't bite me. It wrapped itself around my arm and I could feel it start to squeeze. And then I felt another, and then another do the same thing until my limbs were covered with these serpents. My arms and legs soon went numb under the pressure. The serpents in unison worked together. They used the front half of their long bodies to pull me down deeper into that lake. I didn't fight them. Underwater, there was no way to fight back. I had to stay calm and manage my breathing. My oxygen would deplete rapidly if I gave in to panic, and my only hope was to save enough that I could return to the surface. I closed my eyes as I sank and I focused on my breathing. As I sank, I opened my eyes for a few moments. I could see the weathered houses now teeming with these serpents that had not been there previously. My oxygen was already below half. I closed my eyes again and I continued to sink. The trip to the bottom of the lake took much longer than our initial dive. I worked to maintain my breathing, told myself that it was all I could do. I hoped that my friend was faring better than me. As I opened my eyes again, I saw what appeared to be that shrine. The Dullian Shrine. Except this time it was massive, not the little thing that we had seen in the freezer. The larger serpent swam in front of me, and I closed my eyes instinctively, and I resumed trying to breathe properly as I felt my feet touch the ground. The serpents relaxed their grip on me, and I felt that turbulence in the water as they swam around me. Opening my eyes, I could see the piercing golden eyes of that massive serpent who had wrapped himself around that sunken shrine. The shrine that sat at the bottom, an unholy place of worship for these serpents who would lower their heads in reverence. The large serpent moved his head close to me.
You still live?
It asked. I could only nod my head, and I saw my air was beginning to run low. I could not stay down here much longer, as I saw a group of serpents drag what appeared to be the lifeless body of my friend towards the shrine. It appeared that he could not maintain his breathing, and he suffered the terrible fate of drowning. But I was next. My air was running low, so low in fact that I probably could not make it to the surface even if these serpents let me try. I watched as my friend sank beneath the shrine, the smaller serpents leaving him as an offering that would swiftly be consumed. His bones popped out of his flesh, out of his wetsuit and were pulled towards the shrine like it was some sort of magnet. My friend's bones fused with the shrine, leaving behind a punctured wetsuit filled with the discarded flesh and guts.
I'll return you, but you will put the shrine back where you found it. The Delian Shrine awaits you if you do not.
It said. I could only nod my head once again, as my air ran out and all I could do was hold my breath and wait. The serpent opened its mouth and out came the small golden piece, the serpent piece that had topped the shrine. I grabbed it in my hand and I closed my eyes, but I could no longer hold my breath. Instinctively, my mouth opened in search of air, but all I got was water. And I felt the water fill my insides. My lungs, desperate for air instead, began to fill with the water. I opened my eyes one last time, to see a gleam in that serpent's golden eyes. I woke up along the shore of that lake, gasping for air. Coughing and choking, I turned myself over and I puked out some of the water that I had swallowed. In my hand, I felt the piece of the shrine. The serpent piece reminded me that I had to keep my end of the deal. The boat was nowhere to be found, and my friend was nowhere to be found. But the bone part of the shrine was left conspicuously on the shore where I had awoke. Gathering the bone part of the shrine, I made my way out of there and I found my way home. I was thankful that I had survived. I purchased a large chest and some chains as well as some red spray paint. I rented a small boat and I took it out to the center of that lake and I returned the gold serpent to its rightful place atop the bones. Placing the completed shrine carefully in the chest, I looked at the cursed thing one last time before closing the lid and spray painting it with the words that I did not heed before. Do not disturb the Delian Shrine. I bound the chest in chains and I dumped it in the center of the lake, so that they could rest at the bottom once again. I hope that no one finds that chest, but if they do, they will face the consequences just as we did. I won't be diving ever again.